Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled that we have as our guest Lori Stahl. With that, Roxanne, I'm going to pitch it to you as our host.
Thank you so much, Tom. Lori, thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Hello, always a pleasure.
You're so kind. What I figured I would do is introduce you from how I know you, and then please fill in your professional background, what you think is relevant, or even personal background. And I'll actually go ahead and introduce myself as well, because I'm not the usual host of this podcast. That host is Tom. So I'm Roxanne Petraeus. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ethena, which is a compliance training company. And I also am a mom of two. You may hear one of my kids in the background, despite my best to do noise canceling. And I got really interested about the ethics, compliance, and training space from my experience as an active duty Army officer, realizing that when you can get training right, it has a really profound impact on the organization. Lori, I got to know you through an amazing organization called People Tech Partners, because you yourself are a chief people officer, a longtime sort of HR leader. And I think it's really great to get to talk with you, because normally on this podcast, I'm talking with compliance leaders. But in building Ethena and in serving our wonderful customers, I've learned that compliance and HR actually have a lot of overlaps in terms of like things that they're trying to communicate to a company, occasionally maybe feeling like they don't always get the time, space, or resources to get their message out there because they're competing with sales or tech or something. And I just think there's a ton of lessons learned in terms of how you build a great culture that compliance leaders can learn from HR leaders. So Lori, maybe to kick us off, would you mind giving your background and intro as well?
Yeah, sure. Lori Stahl. I'm the Chief People Officer at Synaptics. I'm based here in California. I have over 25 years of experience in HR. I've directly or indirectly led all of the functions throughout my career. On the personal side, I'm a mom as well to two daughters in college, a wife, can't forget the furry dog as well.
Very important.
Yes, yes. And so luckily I'm at work, otherwise you would hear her probably snoring in the background as well. So I understand
feel like
the balance that we have to do every day.
Totally. I feel like snoring dogs are much cuter in a background than like a kid who pops in and is, "Can I have my video game now?" That's a little more
Sure.
annoying.
Yeah.
But I love that. Okay, I have gotten to know you because Synaptics has been a wonderful customer of Athena. You've gotten to see our approach to compliance training.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, in different organizations, sometimes HR controls compliance training, sometimes it's a stakeholder, sometimes it's compliance. Could you talk to me a little about how you've seen that work in terms of who owns training and how do you think maybe it should work? What's the best way that these stakeholders can work together?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's often a hot potato in a company that people are passing around. And so I think in the most effective companies, it's where certainly led probably by the people function along a deep partnership with the legal function, but also when it's owned by all of the leaders and managers.
Totally. I think something, and I'm curious if you've had this experience, but when I've seen organizations that have it very siloed, so maybe HR owns, say, harassment prevention training, IT owns InfoSec, data privacy owns data privacy, compliance owns code of conduct or whatever. One of many things that can go wrong there is that from the employee experience, it's not really optimal because it's not, like they're, and I think most employees aren't aware of all these different functions. They're like, I don't know, it's mandatory
Right.
training, looks the same to me. Could you
Right.
talk a little bit about what can go wrong if it's like super siloed?
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually really important to me. So I do actually like to own it from the people function because I think first and foremost about the employee experience. And
Totally.
I think that if you get a disjointed compliance strategy, it very much looks and feels like that to employees. And so one of the things that I try to do from our people function is really just to pull it all together with all of those functions. And so even if they might be owning the content, because certainly they're the subject matter experts, we want to build it in one platform with one strategy, with one time cadence, component to ensure that employees aren't being overloaded. We want employees to tune in. It's important information that they need to know to run our business effectively. And so we want to make sure that strategy is seamless across the company. So does that answer that?
Totally. Yeah. I think your point on like employee experience, that's why I've seen a couple of our customers who recently went from very siloed to a comprehensive approach. They actually had people or employee experience owning that because they were thinking about hey, I'm the random salesperson. What is
Right.
my experience of this versus thinking of it from, I'm a compliance leader. I think about this all day, or I'm a
Right.
people leader. This is like a key part of my job.
And
So
I
I
have
think
a,
that's super smart.
yeah, and
Please.
I have an employee experience team that's just thinks about just that. We put together a content calendar. We solicit information from around the business to make sure that messages aren't being stepped on by another team. And so everything gets the spotlight that it's due, but then, we're not overloading employees.
I think that overloading is so crucial. I've heard a lot of complaints about, hey, it feels like we're taking too much time away from our core business function because we have 6, 8, 10 hours. You recently have done a rollout and a revamp. You brought us on, or I guess recently-ish. I feel like all things blend together in my memory of time. Could you talk about how you thought about the right balance of getting the right topics and ideas out, but not overtraining?
Yeah, it was certainly something we thought a lot about because training, there are so many requirements that are time-based. And so if you add up all of the amount of time that it takes in a quarter or a year to train employees, it's significant. And so what we really tried to do is evaluate the content to make sure that it wasn't overlapping, that it was relevant, but wasn't the same messages over and over again. We count literally the minutes that employees are spending doing training. And that was one of the biggest goals of our program, was to make the content relevant, engaging, and certainly from a time perspective to make sure we're not taking too much away from employees and their need to do their day job.
Really smart. And you took on the burden. You described it as a hot potato. That's a great description. Maybe you didn't volunteer for this hot potato, but you got
I
it.
just told it, it's okay.
That's a very, very good team player. And you made the shift to Ethena. And I'm just curious, like, what challenges were you having in pre-Ethena world? And to the extent that we solved them, could you talk to me a little bit about what caused you to be like, hey, I really want to go with a different approach and end up with us?
Yeah, I think one of the main thing is remaining compliant, and it's really hard to stay current and relevant on all of the relevant industry and regional and local laws around the world. Even when it's a country or an area you live in, it's hard to stay on top of. And at Synaptics, we're in 4 countries. And so we really need a partner like Ethena to help ensure that we are on top of the compliance and the ever-changing laws. And that was probably the top thing. The other thing is just, again, the employee experience. And we were doing a lot of homegrown videos and training modules that were really outdated 5 minutes after we made them, on platforms that if somebody left, we had no idea how to actually change the content. So we were recreating things again. So we really needed a seamless platform that would allow the content to stay current and refreshed all the time. And I always just try to take the approach of keeping it simple. I don't think we need to customize everything. I don't think that we have to over orchestrate it. Like, we can orchestrate it. We can simply buy off the shelf relevant content to deliver to our employees and just make it easy administratively and really ultimately make it easy for the employees. And I think Ethena really helped us accomplish that task. And sorry, the last thing I would add, because otherwise my system team will say you forgot about me, is
your systems team rocks. They're very good.
They absolutely do. Is the integration with our HRIS is really important, and our learning management system. So we're lucky enough to have one, whereas lots of companies don't, which then Ethena can of course stand on its own. But with ours, our modules and our courses were breaking. So we were getting hundreds of tickets and employees complaining about the way that it works and the sound, and it would cut off and all kinds of things. And after we went through 1 full year of cycle, our tickets were greatly reduced to almost nothing. More user error things. Don't tell the employees.
It's never user error when it's C-suite, right? Yeah.
And so again, we don't need training to get in the way. They're frustrated already, unfortunately, that they have to take it. And so we really needed a system that just works. And I feel like we also accomplished that with Ethena.
I love that. And I love your realistic approach of an employee. This is probably not the email that they get most excited about receiving in a year. Hey, you've got mandatory training. And so I think that it's really smart to accept that and instead say, okay, how can we earn some trust, because they might already be a little bit grumpy. You talked about at one point having made training in-house, and I love your description of it basically going stale immediately after you call cut on the video or whatever. I definitely talk to compliance leaders who occasionally have this vision of we're going to make all of our own stuff and it's going to look and feel very us. And I think it can be done. Usually it's done if you have really big team and budget and all that. But could you talk a bit about the challenges of having to make content yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, one of the challenges is knowing the content, right? Knowing the
Right.
relevant. I'm just going to go back to knowing the regional and industry laws. We not just having a small team, but you really have to have experts. And I'm also super fortunate that we have really great in-house employment counsel,
Mm.
and not everybody is also lucky enough to have that. But it's hard to stay current on all of those. You can talk about the tactical aspects of just producing content, right?
Yeah.
And making it work, which I also don't have a whole team of people to do that. But then also ensuring that you've got the content right. And also thinking about it from a regional perspective. And I don't also think that one size fits all around the world. And so some of our content, we need to think about how do we tailor it to the local culture or language. And certainly we're not experts in that. And so what I want to stick to is what are the messages that we need to reinforce? What are the compliance or training, if you will, that
Yeah.
help move our business forward, and then leave the hard stuff to the experts.
It's my favorite, right?
Ooh,
It's
I
all
love
that,
it.
all those hard things
Yeah.
we get to do. But I think you're right there. Or I think it's very smart to say, hey, what are we uniquely good at? And I think one of the things you're uniquely good at is maybe your culture best, right? You're always going to be the expert. Could you talk to me about how you've decided if you want to customize or tweak here or there? Like, how has that experience been of like, hey, I don't want to make all this from scratch, but I would like to change happy to glad, start with a video from leadership or anything like that. Any lessons learned from that?
Yeah, so again, I kept saying to the team, try not to customize anything. So
I love
really
this.
tried to take that approach.
Realist, yeah.
Yeah, I think what was nice is we were able to, if we wanted to start with maybe a personalized video. I think it's important when the leaders and the CEOs are certainly reinforcing the messages, right? That
Yeah.
they're actively modeling and discussing compliance issues and really turning into champions. And then also what I think is nice is you can do really small customizations. And again, I find this unique with Ethena is we can link employees back to our own intranet or to our own policies. And so while we don't have to specifically embed the synaptics, for example, information into the content, we can certainly link them to that information. So it draws the connection between sort of the generic, I hate to use that word, but
Yeah.
the vanilla version of the compliance, and then how does that relate to your role here at Synaptics?
I love that because I feel like for the employee, sometimes that connection is really tricky, right? You're like, okay, and what do you want me to do? I'm not being presented with bags of money labeled bribe. What is it that you want me to be aware of? And it's, oh, this. And you're like, okay, cool, great. I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah.
I feel like I would be remiss, just like you shouted out your team. I asked you at one point, how's your experience been with Alana? And you joked, like, how long do you have?
Yeah.
I'm always shocked in the compliance and HR tech, to be candid, space. I hear a lot of frustrations where, like, my vendor doesn't listen. They tell me something's on the roadmap, but I've never seen it. Or just like basic stuff, in my view, as a business owner, of getting back to people quickly and listening and like showing that you have time. Like the vendor bad behavior has really surprised me in both the HR tech and the compliance space. Could you just wax poetic about Alana and your experience with Athena's customer success team?
Absolutely. And among other things, obviously, which started with you, but there's lots of reasons why I became a fan of Ethena. And it is sad. You meet with vendors and it's all of HR tech. I'm sure it's outside of HR tech too, not just to pick on HR side, but you hear about all these great platforms and the services they provide. And I have truly not had a vendor that really delivers that after implementation. Even during
Mm.
implementation, you can start to see cracks of it. And with Ethena, I think what's been really important is that we've had that partnership throughout the process, not only at the beginning when we were discussing our goals around compliance and how we wanted to enhance the program and really build it into the fabric of our company, but then implementing the platform. And then afterwards, the constant check-ins, asking how we're doing. We can call and get a real person, and it makes a difference. And we're not left to, as I have been in lots of other places, create materials, figure out how to fix things. And Ethena has been a really great partner from that perspective. And it is very unique. And I certainly can't diagnose why it happens. I know it's hard, especially with small companies, to have that customer service arm of your company, and how do you make that scalable, right? So you can offer the same type of service. But I think it's absolutely a differentiator in the industry.
Totally. And it is hard in that these are people, like you have to make a decision to kind of staff those roles.
Yeah.
Something that I have found is that our customers tend to give us the best insight on what we should build next. And so it doesn't end up being just customer success, but helping you with your rollout always teaches us something, about, oh, okay, we really ought to change the way that this Workday integration flows. Or I think that if viewed in the what do we get out of this, we being the vendor here, I think it could just be like the most powerful part of the organization, because it's you customers know far better than we do. What do you need in your day to be successful? So I love that.
Right.
Let's see, maybe last question would be like any dreams you have for what in the future Ethena could roll out to support your training program. I always just love, is there anything where you're like, this would be like a really neat way for this to develop, not to make you write our product roadmap or anything?
Oh no, I could nerd out on HR tech and innovations all day long. I have several things, but there are probably a couple of things that come to mind. Is I'd love to see things evolve into being a little bit more personal, right? Making a direct connection between the employee's role and the content. I don't necessarily think one size fits all. So something that is more role specific or scenario based. Adaptive learning could also fit in there as well, like speeding up to slow down based on employee skill.
Yeah.
Another thing that comes to mind is more real-time micro-learning. So like little bit-sized contents delivered in multiple avenues and channels, learning that old theory of just for me, just in time. Like I think about it in terms of a Slack bot, right? Where it might send a short compliance nudge or a quick ethics reminder to somebody before their contract is signed.
Totally.
And then, sorry, the last one, again, I could talk about it all
I'm
day
there
long.
for all of it.
If we think about AI, I might have two more. I think AI can, of course, play an important role in compliance as well, like AI compliance coaches or chatbots. So maybe a leader could ask, can I ask a candidate about a previous salary? And they get a quick, accurate response, a safe place to practice their skills. Inserts the compliance part of that of, are you allowed to ask that? What are the rules around it? So it's giving them real-time practical application while inserting the compliance component.
Totally.
And then one of the things I think you already do well is on the storytelling. And instead of using legal jargon and things that employees don't necessarily understand or frankly are boring, you're using stories, interactive, silly role playing, ways to illustrate compliance challenges in a non-traditional way, which I think engages people differently. Sorry,
I'm so glad I asked this because I love these ideas. Some of them are things that my co-founder and I, who's our CTO, spent a lot of time talking about, like how can we further leverage AI? I'll give like a plug for a couple of things we're doing, because ironically, for another Tom Fox podcast I recorded with Catherine of Zendesk, they're leveraging our adaptive learning feature to do some like test out stuff. So if you ever want to do that, talk to Alana when she's back from mat leave, but you'll have someone covering. And I think that's really cool. It's one use case of many of adaptive learning. So it could be, hey, take this quiz beforehand, and if you don't score X or above, you are going to get more training, or you're going to get training just on the modules that you missed. But I think it's the same way we have a cybersecurity training and a phishing simulator. And the way that our customers use it is they phish their team, and then whoever fails the phish, you click on the bad link. Surprise, you get your additional cybersecurity training. And I think that's actually a really effective way to do training, because you're tying it to an action versus just, hey, everybody, you need this. And then I think you're so right that we have a lot of customers who are doing role-based training today using Ethena, which I think is really neat. So maybe more anti-bribery training or specific training to the sales team, especially if they're government facing, like really being smart about almost their matrix of risks and then assigning training based on that. But I think also with some of the developments we're thinking about using AI in our product, I think that could get even more sophisticated so that Lori's training looks different than Roxanne's training based on a bunch of factors, not just our role in the organization. So I love this vision of personalized, effective training.
Yeah, and there's so many things that managers deal with on a daily basis, and they make these judgments. And they do have implications or consequences for the company from a compliance perspective. And so if there was a little bit of an easier way for them to get that customized
just in time,
right at that moment, coaching, I think that would be amazing.
Man, you are the perfect guest, because you're segueing into maybe the last thing I'll just bring up, which is Ethena in partnership with Ethisphere. And Ethisphere puts out such great content. And one of the things that they say is exactly what you're saying, which is I think what HR people know in their bones, which is like managers are really where it's at. You could train the organization until they're blue in the face, or you could really focus on managers. Because at this year's data shows that like employees are much more likely to bring an issue first to their manager versus bring it to HR or bring it to compliance. And so like that group of people is so important to your culture, to your ethics. That's where things break down, but it's also where things can be successful. And so we're releasing a course that's just targeted toward them on these sorts of like common kind of issues that they're faced with in a very real way. Not, hey, Tim, this thing is going wrong in a very legalese way, but more, hey, do you have just 5 minutes? I've been noticing this thing and I'm a little uncomfortable about it, but I don't know, maybe it's how we do work here. And those are those moments where you really want your managers to have their ears open. So I'm so glad that you raised that, because I think it's like the perfect intersection of HR and compliance.
Yeah, agreed. Again, you're not going to walk into the airport most likely and somebody's going to hand you a bag of money and say, can I have your code from your company? Thinking about these
Much more subtle.
Yeah, that really apply to managers and help them on things that are actually happening in their day-to-day life, I should say.
100%. Lori, this is such a delight to chat with you. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful leader, a really great advocate for Ethena, and writing our product roadmap in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled. I love what you guys are doing. So I'm just happy to be a little bit a part of it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, cool. Tom, I'm happy to invite you back onto your podcast.
So I just want
today, Tom.
I just want to say, I always say it's about the UX. I'm going to have to amend that based on what you said, Roxanne, because you talked about the Ethena learning from your customer and integrating lessons back into both products and services in a way that I've not heard a product provider talk about before. So kudos. It's more than just the UX.
We've got really smart customers, so I like to learn from them.
This has just been a really delightful experience for me behind the scenes and just listening to you all. This has been great. I typically say, I hope we can continue this conversation, but I'm also going to amend that to say, I hope you two can continue this conversation.
I think we'll be chatting in the future. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.